Good day. My name's Enrique Alvarez. I'm the host of Logistics with Purpose. Today we have a very, very special guest with us. And of course, I have a really, really good co-host with me as well. Maureen, how are you doing?
Good. How are you, Enrique?
I'm doing great. So I guess without further ado, have you had a good week so far?
We had a little bit of hurricane cleanup from Hurricane Ian barreling through, not like anything like Florida, but put my kids to work yesterday, picking up pine cones and branches. So I think we're all good so far.
It was a terrible storm. So yes, hearts and prayers to everyone in Florida. And today, again, we have a really good friend, really amazing guest working with a great company. And we're really pleasure to have him here. So Christopher Hussaini, Senior Manager Sales at Hapag-Lloyd. Chris, how are you doing today? Good morning.
Good morning. I'm doing well. Thank you, Enrique and Maureen, for even having me. I'm humbled, and I really like the partnership we have with Vector going on at Hapag-Lloyd, and really great to see you in this venue again.
We love working with your team. You guys have a very strong team, and we appreciate everything you guys do. And we'll get a little bit more into that throughout this interview. But I just want to make sure that to thank you for everything that you guys do. Thank you so much. Yeah, and thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Chris, to break the ice a little and start us off, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, your childhood, any fun stories you'd like to share?
Yeah, okay. I'm from Miami, Florida, and born and raised. I went to high school there, and I even went to University of Miami for my undergraduate degree. I had a good childhood. My father worked for the government, the local government in IT and so forth, and my mom was a nurse. And my father's he passed about 12 years ago, actually. But he was Persian. He was from Iran, came in the early 70s, and my mom's American. And Miami is a very culturally eclectic place. And a lot of people think it's mainly Hispanic, but it's a lot more diverse than that. So I have really all my friends are from everywhere in the world. They were all kind of hybrids or whatnot of everything. And I'd say the childhood was good. Miami's changed a lot. And I was living there I was born in the late 70s. So from that time to what it is now, it's obviously evolved in many ways. And I was probably one thing that stands out, probably one of the most indelible memories is you're speaking about hurricanes. I was 15 when Hurricane Andrew hit us. And I was living in a house we had moved in maybe within 6 months. And I thought I was some brave kid and I'm going to sleep in my room. And my mom was crying, saying, no, we all have to sleep in the hall. We didn't know what a hurricane was or what it would be like because it was the first in our lifetime. And they convinced me to sleep in the hall. And it was a good thing because the roof in my room collapsed and I probably would not have made it. And then, during the storm, we had to run across because the windows broke and the rain and the wind, and it was insane. We went into my parents' bedroom, master closet, and we were all, except for my dad, crying like babies. And my dad wanted to cry. I saw it in his eyes. And it was kind of like torture. It felt like, I don't know what war is like. I've never been in it, but it was 4 hours and we had the eye come over and then like another 4 hours. And I lived in a hotel for like 3 months. And it was a really interesting experience. And it was one I remember in quite some detail. So I'd say that's kind of on the negative side, but I think with the positive that comes out of it, you realize how kind of fortunate we are. We always take things for granted, at least from my perspective of it's human nature. And just, I think that experience and some others going through it and growing up in Miami, it was good. And I miss home a little bit, quite candidly.
So Chris, when you were growing up, did you, your family ever go back and visit where your dad was from?
No, ironically, I recently got a passport from Iran, but it's due to an inheritance and all of that, but I've never been there. For a number of reasons, with the government, with all of that going on. And even though I don't speak Farsi, I'm an American, I've never spoke, I am considered a citizen and could go in the military and all of that. And I like history.
Is that how Iran works? Is it dual citizenship they allow you to have because of?
They don't recognize the U.S. It goes off the blood of the father. So
got it. Okay.
Unfortunately, it's a little
Okay.
archaic, or maybe a
Okay.
lot.
Well,
So
I
that's-
think Brazil does that, but with the mother, I
Oh,
believe.
interesting.
Yeah, a friend of mine, her kids are like Brazilian. She has a Brazilian passport because her mom is from Brazil, but she's from the US. And her
Interesting.
kids as
Okay.
well. So I think every country has a different thing, but I was just curious because it's, like you
Yeah.
said, Miami is a really, culturally eclectic place, which would be very interesting to grow up there because you're just exposed to so many different things when I think
Yeah.
it opens your eyes up at an early age, which I would argue we need a lot more of that. And but travel, I'm sure anywhere is pretty expensive. So I wasn't sure if you were able to make it back there. If you're
Yeah, I had never been there. I wasn't born there. I was born in Miami, so I've never been there. But at some point, if things get better, I'd like to go. I like history. There's a great history, and the people are good people. There's good food and all of that. The government, not so much from my perspective, at least. So
right.
Right, but that's an incredible story, and I was just going to ask you for a story that shaped who you are. I don't know if that one is one that actually shaped who you are and what you have become now, but if there's any other that you might remember, like growing up, early days in Miami with your parents and your family, is there anything else
yeah,
that started pushing you towards
yeah. There's probably a couple things. One I don't often talk about. Most people don't know about me. I was a really late bloomer. So when I was in high school, I looked like I was probably 8, 9 years old. I'm not kidding. At first, before I went to private school, I went to a public school for a year and a half. And I was the third shortest kid out of 4,000 people. 4,000.
Well, and I laugh
Girls were-
because I
Wow.
was that kid too, by the way.
Yeah.
So it
Really?
remind me of my upbringing as well.
Enrique's
So
having
go ahead.
flashbacks over there.
Yes, that's what I
Wow,
laughed.
interesting.
Starting to
We can
swear
relate.
here.
So I'd say that kind of had an effect on me. So it was the kind of thing, the girls would pinch my cheeks, that I'm a little kid. Maybe I didn't really get so much bullied, but what I think in retrospect, I really was forced to develop my personality of how to engage others, how to realize that a lot of people getting to know, almost the saying that you get to know more people in 2 months by being genuinely interested in them than by trying to get them interested in you. And I think that whole psychological element allowed me later in life to connect better with people and maybe make it a little bit, if there is some degree of a natural in sales and business and the human relationship aspect, I think it's that if I go back to that. So I think that had some shape in it in my life. I was in Shotokan karate for 9 years, and my
nice.
my best friend, his father was one of the highest ranked. He was Mr. Japan twice. Is still alive.
Wow.
Shion Sugimoto. He taught Schwarzenegger for Total Recall. Did the Miami Vice fight quarter.
Wow.
Anyway, but very tough. And part of the reason I guess I was small and I got sent there, so I didn't get picked on, right?
Right.
And I think the discipline on that was really, really good because it helped me in school and university to a high degree, because it's like, oh, this is nothing. I have to do this, right?
Right.
And then I'd say kind of in a difficult one was I mentioned my father. He died when he was young, 61.
Wow.
And that was a very, very difficult thing because he was my best friend. But I'd say the gift he gave me when he passed away was the fact that probably not many days are going to be as bad. So that was my bottom, right? That's how I felt the bottom was. So everything, no matter what a bad day, what a hard challenge or whatever, it's all relative. And it's not that big a deal. I'm able to recover. And I've noticed that many times in life of different things, sometimes difficult things, right?
Wow.
Right, but it puts things into perspective for sure, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it does.
Well, if you could turn back time and talk to your 21-year-old self, what would you tell him?
Wow. Probably a lot. There's a lot I would definitely tell him.
What's your top 3?
The top 3, okay, I'd say
Or
one of
one.
them, obviously knowing what I know now, which I didn't, in terms of even spending more time with my father. I was the kind of guy, particularly in university, every winter, every summer, I was traveling Europe. Maybe when kids are spending money on their car, the rims, I was like, forget it, I'm going to Europe. I love to travel. I love that. So I was doing that a lot, and I was away a lot of those times. So maybe I would have scaled that back a little bit. I think also probably telling myself that time goes by quick, and the older I get, the quicker it goes by. So I think probably I would have invested in a lot of different ways, knowing what I know. and knowing that it'll get there. I'd say that in terms of the kind of investment. And then I think in the professional, I'd probably tell myself, and it took me a little bit later in life, probably my early mid-30s, to really realize, sadly, it doesn't even matter, at least in a large corporation, from my perspective, being effective is very important, but your brand also matters, right? So making sure, I remember when I had first started in this industry, I was young, mid-20s. I was good in my job, but there was a few times, even on a night, come Friday, like I was, not sleeping really well. And those kind of things could affect one's image, even though the effect is there, right? And that's something I learned a little bit later, that it's right or wrong, perception is viewed as important, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I couldn't agree with you more, right? Effectiveness is definitely critical, but everyone has its own personal brand, and then companies have their brands as well, and they're getting more important, I think. And I think they'll be critical going forward. Now, if we switch gears a little bit and just tell us a little bit more about your professional journey, and we'll talk a little bit more about Hapag-Lloyd and your career path with them. But before that, tell us a little bit more how you kind of started looking to logistics as a potential career path.
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's probably not the traditional one. I'd love to say it was planned and it was all. That's not how it happened. So
no one gets into logistics like that.
Yeah,
But then you never want to get out of it. That's the thing. You
That's
get into
true.
it by accident, but then you don't want to leave it.
It's kind of like The Godfather 3. You try to get out, and they pull you back in, right? I think that's So I would say, after I graduated University of Miami, as I mentioned, and I also mentioned I love to travel. So I found a really interesting way to get my father's approval to be in Europe, but under a good thing. I got into a really good school in England for my master's. But, and it was in computer science, something disparate from my study, but it was good. It was highly ranked. I went to University of York there in York,
Nice.
United Kingdom. And it was only a year. So the sell is, hey, it's a good school. I'm continuing my education. I'll have a master's. It's 1 year. And then, of course, I got to also travel to Europe, and it was a phenomenal experience. I had friends from all over the world, super multicultural, friends to this day from all over. And then I came back, and, probably not unlike a lot of people, I thought I was going to light the world on fire. And I went to start this company that the idea was good. And it was basically, without exaggerating, it was the precursor to Airbnb, but 10 years before. Because again, me traveling would always stay in rentals, apartment rentals, wherever in Europe, because I always liked the space, the flexibility, all of these things. How could we have the renters and the host and assign them? And there was a series of misfortunes that occurred, and then it didn't work out, right? I'd say one is funding, development. We had a developer, unfortunately, he was 47-year-old vegetarian that died of a heart attack. But I'd also, if I'm putting blame also myself, I'd say I probably didn't really fully have the grit that was needed to stay the course. So it didn't work out. And probably after 6 months of partying on South Beach, my father's like, you have a master's son, you need to get a job. And that's, right. Yeah. So I started off in Evergreen. I didn't know, really think about, probably like most people out of the industry, how does our clothes, how does really most commodities get from here to there? Didn't really put a lot of thought to it. And that's kind of how I fell into it.
Wow. That's, you're right. Not a very common path towards logistics. So we're looking for a job, Evergreen offered it, and that was it.
But isn't it weird now that like you started with Evergreen, you weren't thinking about like how do things get from A to B, right? But now that's all you think about. You're like, oh, I wonder how that got there. Or it's like, how did I not think of that before? And now I always feel I get caught up in that sometimes.
Yeah, it's really interesting, like how much, I guess in anything, whether it's how much of it relies on kind of timing and luck, and how much is that intersection. It's an interesting point.
Yeah, I agree.
Chris, do you still have that kind of entrepreneurship bug in you? I mean, it seems like you've been very entrepreneurial. And I guess, hey, Airbnb, that's a
it didn't work out. They made it happen, but yeah.
It was a great idea, though. I mean, super validating the fact that someone else ran with it.
But it goes to show that it's not just the idea, and it's other things. Yeah, I'd say I do. But one thing I've certainly learned, and I guess I also learned the hard way, it's probably better not to put all your eggs in one basket. Do something so you're secure, and then you know, if something takes off, then you can make that decision later. That's probably how I would view it. But I'd say that's the drive I have. I've stayed in the business side and in Hapag and all of that, and you know, I the foray is into that, into charitable, that the hunger, the fun, the winning. I love that aspect.
So is that how, when you were at Evergreen and then later when you were at Hapag or still are at Hapag,
Mhm.
how did you get into the sales aspect of it?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I started off actually in sales. I started
Okay.
off in I was in inside sales for a little bit less than a year, and I remember there was a senior rep that left, and I got my opportunity. And you know, I guess I was doing well, and they put trust in me. And I remember, and a lot of things come back to my father. You know, I was a young, somewhat a young kid there, and I remember even asked my dad, "Should I go ahead and take it?" I guess on the confidence, and he basically says, "Chris, you're a hardworking guy. In life, it's always better to say yes, and if you don't like it, you can always go back. And sometimes you don't get the chance again." And I think that was very good advice, and it did that and further build confidence and successes, and kind of put it like, hey, you know what? Now I'm on this. I need to perform at a higher level, and I think that with maybe kind of the back and a good foundation, it really was a good message that if sometimes we don't push ourselves or go to the kind of the next level, we don't really know what we could do.
Right.
And if
Absolutely.
you play it safe, you're you know, it's easy to play it safe, but you're never going to know if you don't push yourself, from my perspective.
No,
Did
you're,
you ever
and
think you'd be in sales? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it comes natural. It's something I also like, because I think there's a lot of psychology in sales as well. If you're doing consultative selling, really of getting to know the customer's needs, and finding a solution to that, and not trying to sell a pre-canned thing, but what are your needs? What are those? How could we have a solution that we could find something creative? Because I think there are sometimes out of the box creative solutions to things, particularly in this industry, right? Which is very
Yeah.
difficult.
Yeah.
well, so, it sounds like your dad was a very, very smart individual as well. What was his name, Chris?
My dad's name was Masood Hussaini.
Masood.
Yeah.
Masood.
Yeah.
Yeah, very, very good piece of advice there, and you took it, you ran with it, and you've made a whole career out of that. So congratulations to you. There's a lot of sales reps and people in the commercial area that are listening to us. Is there like any kind of secret to what you would think, especially in this industry, especially now that's getting kind of tougher and tougher, and in Miami, that I know it's a very competitive market when you started?
Yeah, I mean, it has changed. I know we're getting it probably into the pandemic part of the conversation. The past 2 years, I don't think anybody who has been in this industry,
No.
whether it's 5 years, 30 years,
Mm.
has seen this. And so I don't think there was a blueprint for it. So I would, and there have been a lot, unfortunately, a lot of pain associated with it in terms of operational and all of that. So I think in terms of the sales, it comes down to a few basic things that it makes it sound easier by being basic than what they really are, because it's really hard to do with the discipline. I think it's, first of all, it's knowing your products for the solutions and knowing your customers. I think it's also asking a lot of open-ended questions and trying to be consultative selling for our customers to try to sometimes find those creative solutions. And a lot of sales on the carrier, from my perspective, is the internal sales, right? It's all these internal stakeholders. How do you help on behalf of the customer to help the customer navigate the company, particularly as you're a global company with a lot of offices, a lot of moving parts, and help with that. And it's the constantly being in between. It's true account management from my perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah. And especially with the scope of global supply chain, right? It's tons of moving parts. Is there in your career, or since you've started in logistics or supply chain, is there like a specific or a key moment that you thought this was very strategic, or a moment that you were mostly proud of since you started? What were you most proud of since you started in this industry?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I really liked when I was a sales rep, and I was that for quite a while, and I really got it. I felt I had good relationships and was able to be successful in that. But I would say really, and I didn't think so at the time, when I got the opportunity to move into management, where it was less about me and more about the team, and finding the strategy, the cohesion, building the culture of the team, helping mentor and have maybe some of the more junior in their career or less experienced in the industry not have to go through the same mistakes I have, and teach them the shortcuts, and empowering and engaging them. And the reward from that, from my perspective, is something that I really can't place. And I didn't realize I would find so much joy out of it. And it's something I really, really, really like. It's the role of a coach, right? And I'd say that I'm pretty proud of that. And I'd like to believe, and hopefully my team will say the same, that we have a great culture. We all get along. We work well collaboratively, no sharp elbows, this kind of stuff. And we could all win. For people to win, others don't have to fail.
I like that.
Yeah, and Chris, we love it at Vector. We love working with you. So it's a pleasure to have you on here to talk about, give you the opportunity to talk about your culture, your work environment, things like that. Can you tell us anything more about how Hapag is different or unique within the steamship line or transportation industry?
Yeah, I would say obviously we're a very large organization with over 14,000 employees, hundreds of offices all over the world. And I do think that I would say what really separates us is our culture. And we have really, particularly locally, we have really, really great leadership. And it's really the culture is what's the glue that keeps us together. So I'd say in terms of the culture, it's really strong in terms of coaching and development, in terms of a commitment to excellence, in terms of open communication and trust. And it creates a really, really good environment, and particularly that we empower, engage, and not micromanage, and give the tools and say, hey, here's the goal. Here's how we want to get there. Of course, there's coaching and development, how to do it, but not to necessarily micromanage, because usually I think micromanagement comes through a lack of trust. And if you have the right employees, and you should trust them, and we have to give those opportunities to do that. So I'd say that's a big thing. And another thing I'd say that is really good on the tool side, we have really great visibility into our costs. There's empowerment on the sales team in order to make decisions. Of course, there's certain things checked by our trade management on the sales side, and to go after different businesses and be agile. So I'd say there's that compared to some of my experience with some other carriers.
Okay, great.
No, that makes sense. And hey, and you can tell. I mean, I'm sure that people that are listening to this interview and people that have had the pleasure of working with not only Hapag, but some of the other steamship lines, you can start to kind of pinpoint what the culture of each organization is. And you're, I think, very, very, I guess, on point when it says coaching and trusting and very open and visibility and excellence. And I think you're right. And probably that's why I think a lot of companies like working with you guys, because of that culture that you have been developing and you continue to develop. So thank you so much. No, I mean, it's a process. We're not where we'd like to be. And, one of our goals is to be number one for quality, and we're not there, right? It's difficult, but we're determined to get there. And there's, other stuff we're doing in order to put us on that map to get there. So you briefly talked a little about the pandemic, and of course we're going to bring it up because it was, as you said, very unexpected. No one was ready. One of those incredible worldwide historic events, I would say. Mm-hmm. What were some of the biggest challenges, and how did you, your team, and Hapag kind of overcame it? Yeah. So what I would say is, and some of what I'm going to say is my perspective, so it's not necessarily official Hapag one. So that's my disclaimer. I'd say in the beginning, I think most thought that in the very beginning, the unexpected is that we're all going to take an insane hit. There's going to be maybe companies going out of business. We didn't know. So there was probably some degree of that kind of a stance. And initially there was a dip. And then overall, and again, here's my perspective. I follow different economists. I'm not an economist or whatnot. I follow a lot of Larry Summers, stuff like that. It does seem to me, just looking back, the response to the pandemic, right or wrong, not making a judgment, I know where we had to do it, with everything closing down, funneled all the demand really in one mainstream of purchasing, which is online and retail. And then you throw in extra stimulus for needed reasons, and there was a huge surge in demand
probably in a just-in-time infrastructure in the US in terms of that. And it has led to a lot of obviously operational challenges and demand surges and spikes in areas that one wouldn't expected. And then the need to accommodate that. And then with the vessel, the vessel's not being lingering out because of that demand not coming in, it's creating shortages, rates are going up. So it's been very, very challenging. And I'd say, obviously on the good side, there was a lot of revenue associated with it, which is good for security. But on the same time, there's a lot of pain for our customers, a lot of we get to know our customers such as you, and we take it as also personal. And it doesn't always feel good. Hey, there could be revenue, but there's a lot of pain. There's a lot of extra work. There was a lot of unsatisfied customers for a lot of reasons. And that part is not ideal. But I do hope and think, just almost going off the analogy of a hurricane, that sometimes what could come good after a tragedy is that you stress test it and you build something. So if there's another one going in the future, the reaction to it, and there's a learning lesson.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, if you think about when you talked about joining Evergreen, and then later Hapag, thinking about where things come from and how they get there, if there's a moment or a period of time where so many eyes worldwide were focused, like, where's my stuff? The pandemic really put more eyes on an environment that was really stretched to its max with capacity. So like Hapag and your customers like us, we had to have a lot more conversations to understand why things were the way they were. But then we also had to have them with our customers who didn't really understand. They were even further removed from the how things work process. So it was definitely the learning process, I would argue, for everybody within the supply chain. And hopefully, I think now people are a little bit more aware of the process. So you never want to feel like you're making excuses, but there were just some things where I think it was harder to explain to everybody where that domino fell. And, we ended up.
I agree. I think in general, people are more aware of supply chain logistics, ocean shipping, and everything that has to do with moving products from one point to the other. So I think that's another benefit, I guess, or silver lining from such a horrible pandemic, right? People are just more aware of what it entails to ship products around.
Yeah, I guess one could have argued before, hey, you know what? Now that everybody knows, it was probably for the wrong reasons, right?
Right.
For challenge. It's kind of like the silent unsung hero before.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I will say there's less people's eyes that glaze over when they ask you, like, what do you do now versus before the pandemic? Because you're like, I work in transportation, logistics, or supply chain. Before they were like, and how about that baseball game or something like that? Whereas I feel like now they're like, oh, a light bulb goes off. So, I think it's a definite shift. But, one of the ways that we've worked closer with you and your team is working to help the people of Ukraine in the past, 6-7 months. I would love for you to talk to our listeners and tell them a little bit about kind of what you guys are doing, kind of maybe internally, but also what you have done as part of our initiative to help in the region.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, this initiative on a personal level is really, really near and dear to my heart. I met my wife is Ukrainian. We met in Kyiv while I was working in Hamburg, and my in-laws are still there. They're in a city called Zhytomyr, which is about 85 miles west of Kyiv. Wow. So they're still there, and I have a lot of friends there as well, and I've been there many times. So there's also kind of that element to it. But in terms of what we're doing, first of all, obviously, a lot of credit and kudos to Vector with the purpose-driven organization that you are and what you've done for Ukraine and sending the relief shipments and us partnering up locally with you on a few of those shipments. First of all, it was really personally rewarding, and we're really happy for that. So there's, of course, what we've done with you. We've done internal drives in just America in terms of company matches for all the money being sent there. We have for our personal colleagues, we had an office in Odessa, relocated them and their families to any of our offices anywhere in Europe or different areas they like to go. Obviously, took care of everything to set them up. We also have done a lot of not only fundraising, but relief with our colleagues at the border, with supplies and that stuff's ongoing. And there's obviously, and sometimes it's also hard to see the full scope because we're such a big organization. We'll see different articles of other stuff being done, but I only have a small view of it. But we've been, a strong supporter of that, and as well as many other, I'd say, initiatives.
Right, right.
Well, are they, speaking of additional initiatives, we know that Hapag has a very purpose-driven organization, and of course, a great culture, as you mentioned. Are there any other particular charitable organizations that you'd like to share, or any other, I guess, purpose-driven initiatives, as you mentioned, that you guys actively participate in right now?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, there are a lot, and quite candidly, I only have visibility to some of them because a lot of them are there's stuff globally and the stuff we're doing in North America. In North America, but besides that, of course, there's definitely feeding the homeless. There's different stuff for mentoring the youth. In Hamburg, there's a lot of stuff also for a lot of migrants who come over, not only from Ukraine, from anywhere, of doing that, initiatives for women to help them in the workforce, giving different trainings and so forth. Diversity and inclusion is a huge part of us, part of our organization, to purposely go and outreach where traditionally maybe, just like, for example, me, I randomly fell into the logistic industry. How do we go ahead and penetrate into different communities that maybe would be isolated from it? So there's a lot of these different things going on, and again, I have even a very small visibility to all of them just because of our scale.
A big push for sustainability as well, I've heard, right? I mean, there's a huge kind of initiative
Huge. That's
for
one of our
Hapag-Lloyd.
major pillars. Yeah, sustainability is really, really important. How do we be green? How do you be more efficient? How do we save the environment, which, some may argue it's a race to do so, right? So that's a huge part. We actually, a lot of our new builds coming out are really environmentally friendly with the latest technology,
Right.
and so forth. So.
Yeah. Well, so we covered kind of the whiplash effect of the pandemic and how that really was a stress test for the logistics industry and how it affected Hapag specifically, and Sector 2 we talked about, and a little bit about Ukraine. Kind of switching gears a little, the industry, and there's trends and things are changing. What are you seeing on your side? What do you see the next quarter, next year? Any words of wisdom, insight, from an insider that you might be able to share with us and our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say it's probably not a surprise when we hear all the doom and gloom about economic news and so forth, about stocks being full in terms of ordering. We are starting to see a deterioration in certain capacity and all of that, particularly on TP, but on some other TP westbound, the import trade and some other trades. So we're starting to see some more space. We're seeing stuff open up. We're seeing more competition in terms of lanes and certain market. We're having to adjust to the market. I would say, obviously, it's, in terms of what we could expect, I think on the financial side, we'll end quite well still, because it's still elevated from a year ago. But I think things will start to eventually normalize. And they're starting probably already. Timeline, anyone knows, anything could happen. A black swan event could come out, but it does seem like now things are shifting quite a bit. And hopefully with that comes stability as well, though. And that's would be the good part for the customer and the supply chain and all of that. So
hopefully we'll get some stability, and I totally agree with what you said. We're running a little bit out of time. It's been an amazing conversation with you. Quick question also for the people that are trying to come into logistics, for the younger people that are graduating and also trying to join supply chain or logistics. What would be a good advice from you to try to succeed in this industry?
Well, I would say, I think a really good thing, let's say they're either still in college or early in their career, I think it's good to start to get your foot in the door in the industry, whether it's with, whatever logistics company, whether it's a carrier or NVO or BCO, maybe through an internship, to see if it's something you like. I think one thing that's really good in our educational system in the US, we have electives. So you can see, hey, maybe I thought I like it, but maybe I don't. Maybe you find out you love it and you go that way. And I think that's probably a good way to do that. And then I would say also to find a mentor. Find somebody that you trust with experience in that and to give it to you straight. And I think that'll really speed up one's progression and knowledge.
Good advice. Thank you so much.
How can our listeners connect with you, learn more about Hapag, reach out to you?
Yeah, okay. I'd say there's a few ways. I'd say LinkedIn is really good. I'm on LinkedIn, Christopher Hussaini, and also Hapag-Lloyd is on LinkedIn, and I post a lot of different things on there as well. So I think that's a great way to keep up to date, to keep on a lot of the initiatives we talk, whether they're charitable, whether they're environmental or whatnot. And obviously our website, hapag-lloyd.com, you can see all our services and learn more about us. And feel free to reach out to me and say hello.
Awesome.
Chris, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you once again for taking the time and talking to us today. We have really enjoyed this conversation. And for everyone else out there listening to Logistics with Purpose, if you like conversations like the one we had today with Chris, don't forget to subscribe. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode of Logistics with Purpose.